Well, okay, board members, we're going to begin. Hey, Board Member Reby, can I get you to go, and there's a couple board members just, no, I want you to go and return with a couple board members. Go left, through the door, and there's a couple of them we're after. I think there's one, yep, okay, we're good. Good job, Board Member Reby, you're awesome. You didn't have to whistle or anything. Okay, we appreciate everyone's patience on adjusting the agenda. Next up is one that a lot of people have been looking forward to, and that is item number 9, statewide school safety conference report and proposal. Is this going to be, are you part of this, Dr. Dixon, or is this strictly all?
I'm at the whim of member.
Do we have Dr. Norman here and soon, we hope? Okay, we're going to turn the time over to Board Member Warner, who's been very involved in school safety on a couple things, and so we'll turn the time over. I think you have a PowerPoint presentation, so no, not until I flip this switch right here.
Yeah, you
You're
may
good.
want to keep it quiet for a minute. Okay, so a little bit about what we've been doing. I am part of the School Safety Commission with Representative Ward and Representative Kennedy. Oh, okay. Oh, whoops. I am so technologically challenged, I didn't know how to do that. Anyhow, I've been part of that commission, and we've been looking at a number of issues and a number of ideas. We've been ranking them and rating them. We met with the governor earlier today to talk about some of the ideas that our commission really likes. We talked about what would be needed in legislation as well as fiscal notes, and got some background on how we're going to continue proceeding. There will be a meeting this evening, and we'll try to continue making some decisions as we move forward with the School Safety Commission. In the meantime, Dr. Dixon and Dr. Norman and I went to Indiana a couple of weeks ago, and I think Indiana has an excellent model. They have every school has a school safety officer. And I want to get away from the idea that school safety is only school shootings. There are a number of issues that are involved with school safety. Everything from child abuse to truancy to background checks to fire codes to information sharing to reporting requirements to suspensions and expulsions, threats, substance abuse, weapons. There's a myriad of issues involved with school safety. So we went, and so what they do is in Indiana, they have a training once a year. It is mandated that every school safety officer in the state attend a training. Now, some of the school safety officers in Indiana they're SRO officers. Others are administrators, others are teachers, others are paraprofessionals. And so they have a training, and what we went to was their advanced training, which was held this year. And there are different trainings throughout the year. You go to the time that fits best for you. But these are some of the topics that we looked at. And Sid and Patty and I, we all didn't go to the same trainings. We kind of divided and conquered. And so, for example, I liked Stop the Bleed, which was learning how to put on a tourniquet. There was also one on drug identification and intervention that was excellent. And one of the things that was really interesting is, in light of HB 239 with truancy, and the changes with truancies not being able to be referred to juvenile court, what Indiana was doing in handling truancies. And so we just picked a variety of topics and went into their trainings. I'm not sure. Oh yeah, this is a good slide. It shows you that they have to have this, it's physical as well as safety. So USBE currently has, yes.
Go back to that slide.
Do you want me to go back to that? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. I think one of the important things about that slide is that the Indiana Department of Education has a really comprehensive website.
Yes.
And that's just a screenshot, and the URL is at the top. But if you go to that website, you'll see a number of different resources. And it's, as we have scanned all the various state websites around school safety, this one, there are several out there, but this one is really comprehensive and yet really easy for the public to navigate in terms of resources and parts of an overall safety modality of thinking, really, as a state. So that's, when you have time, it would be a great reference for you to
This
look
is
at.
their safety plan. I printed it out because I don't know how to use Google Drive very well. So this is their safety plan along with some resources and some of the legislative changes that they've made recently and their code. Okay. So USBE currently has a number of responsibilities when it comes to school safety. Everything from bullying violence to physical restraints to reporting to law enforcement, parental notification. And so this basically, this slide basically shows what the topic is and how many responsibilities or rules or statutes we have or are ordered to do something with in the state of Utah. So you can see we have a number of responsibilities, and it's a wide variety of responsibilities. We currently have a number of statewide school safety initiatives. There is a safety work group that President Niederhauser is leading. There is the Utah School Safety Commission with Representative Kennedy, and there is the gathering of school safety data. So the governor talked this morning about, he had talked with USBA and USSA regarding superintendents and principals and administrators in gathering school safety data. For example, what was the school safety plan at that particular school, and were they following it? And if not, why not? Were there gaps? Were there issues and barriers? And so he's gathering that information with his staff. And then we had the USBE study session a month ago, maybe, or 2 months ago? I can't remember. So those are the things that we're doing regarding school safety. So as you'll recall, we put out a survey, and I broke down the survey results into 4 categories: the physical safety of students, emotional safety, professionals and safety, and technology and safety. So for example, the physical safety, video cameras, making sure entrances are strengthened, door jams, things like that. Rich County, for example, I'll use them as an example. They're out in the middle of nowhere, and law enforcement would take quite a long time to respond. It could be as upwards of 20, 30 minutes before law enforcement was to get there. So they've made the decision that everything is locked down at their school when school starts, at all of their campuses, and you have to go through security, a video camera. So if I show up at Rich High School in the middle of the day, I'm going to have a video camera that's going to ask me, who am I, what do I want, and then based on my answers, they'll determine if I'm coming in or not. So the physical safety of a building, do they have regular lockdown drills? Are maps updated with 911 or with our dispatch centers? Things like that. Emotional safety, we heard a number of concerns about how do we increase kindness and respect with students? How do we increase students caring about each other, buddy benches, and decreasing class sizes? We talked about professionals and safety and got a number of responses. Overwhelmingly, people do not want teachers to be forced to carry guns. If a teacher wants to carry a gun, most people felt that that was okay, but overwhelmingly there was a support to not make teachers do that. There was also overwhelming support for social workers or therapists to be in the school system. And then last was the technology and safety. So for example, the Tresset Group software, there are all these different apps out there and a lot of software out there that goes to managing safety in a school. So those are some of the things that we've talked about, and then some of the things that we've talked about with the School Safety Commission. So I would like to make a motion today that I can't remember what. Oh yeah, thank you. Because I don't know how to go back and forth. I'd like to move to direct staff to seek input and establish a framework for a statewide school safety plan for board consideration. I think it's imperative in today's times that we have a statewide school safety plan. As you can see from one of those prior slides, we have the Senate president, we have the legislature, we have the governor, and yet we're kind of lacking on one. And perhaps we need to follow Indiana, Texas, and a couple of other states, but do something that's best for Utah in establishing a school safety plan. So my motion is to direct staff to seek input and establish a framework for that safety plan for us to look at.
Okay, we have a motion and a second discussion to that motion. Board Member Reby?
I went to a meeting at a elementary school and saw a potential solution for dealing with safety in our schools. As I spoke to the police officers and the district personnel, I discussed how I was a police dispatcher up at Alta before we had a statewide 911 system. I would really like us to think about working with our law enforcement, and I'd like to make this a plan that we can radiate out to every district. I know that we talk about local control, but 911 was not a effective model for local control. 911 has to be comprehensive. It has to go from county to county, district to district, because as the police dispatchers and the police officers said at that time, if something happens at one school, it's not going to be just one district responding. It's going to be every district responding. It's going to be every resource available to try to help whatever district is in peril. The fact that when you are dealing with two different systems from one police department to the next police department, from district to district, that takes time and it slows down response. I would like us to look at this as not just a school issue with some of these safety issues, but a state safety issue. When we look for solutions to wildfires, we don't look to our counties as much as we look to our state. When we look at disasters, we don't look to the county, we look to the state. So I would like the state to work with the police department, the fire department, and I would like us all to understand that this is not just a district problem, it's not just a school problem, this is a safety concern for every district, every child, every parent, every person involved is hand in hand saying we need to take care of our kids, our teachers, our schools, everything. So I'd like to say, I'd like for us to reach out to our state's organizations and get them on board and work with us on this for funding, for plans, and I'd like it to be uniform so that there's not 1 second wasted talking from agency to agency.
If I could add to that, I really appreciate that, and I would highly agree with you. When we have an issue at a school, like a serious incident at a school, whether it be a flood, whether it be damage done to a school, out of control student, or a serious issue there, we do have a number of law enforcement agencies that work together and respond. And so I would like to hope that one of the first groups that we contact would be our local law enforcement agencies as well as our state law enforcement to get input from both rural as well as urban law enforcement agencies, because the responses are going to be a little bit different, but they have the same standards that they use. So I appreciate that.
Can I make a comment, Mark? I don't know where you are in the queue.
Yeah, we'll take your comment because you're in, but we have about 4 or 5 board members that want to comment, so go ahead.
Well, we just had the tour that we took up at the Emergency Management Resource Center up at the Capitol, and I think they're our statewide resource for emergency response. So I think we need to be coordinating with them, and they're very happy to do that. I don't know how many board members went on that tour, but it was very helpful to all of us, I think.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Lisa Cummins.
Thank you, Chair Huntsman. Board Member Warner, I appreciate your report, and I'm grateful for all the work that you've done on the commission with Representative Kennedy and various others. I too have also been involved investigating especially what the Jordan School District has been doing and looking at other schools and what they've been doing for school safety. And I have recently been invited to a community type, a community-led rather, committee to talk about school safety. And while you're talking about Indiana, they talked about Virginia and their school violence intervention policies there. So that may be another state to look at in comparison. One thing when talking to the Jordan School District, one thing that they said that with all of these grand ideas to secure a school coming from the public, it all is going to come down to the fire code, the international fire code, and whether or not we can implement various, like a sleeve on the door, right, or a separate lock. It's all going to come down to fire code. And right now, from what I'm being told, is that the fire marshal will say, nope, you can't have that lock on the door because it inhibits, you know, somebody getting out, or you can't violate the ADA, or you can't violate, you know, this law or code. So, you know, we're talking federal laws that also that we have to look at, that I don't know if other states have looked at it. I'm curious as to how Tennessee did it, because I understand that they have implemented safety measures that we all think is great. I think we've seen the video at one point. So has that been accounted for, the IFC and Fire Marshal Code?
Yeah, that's one of the things that we've talked about. One of the things that would need to be looked at. I listed a few things, but there are a number of areas of school safety, and one of them is the fire code. I believe Board Member Hanson has information on that because she was working on it. But that is one thing that is on our list.
Board Member
Do
Cannon?
you want me to respond to that, Mark?
Sure,
Sorry.
you're there. So,
So it will be discussed in law licensing tomorrow, but we are going to be working with the fire marshal through the governor's office on some of those kinds of things, just so everybody's aware.
just so that you know, it's to meet everyone's expectation, law and licensing, I think that's on fire drills and stuff, but then there's the code, and I don't think the code's going to be talked about when it comes to the buildings and safety and ADA, just to help manage everyone's expectations there.
I think it's part of, we're going to start the discussion on that. So
Perfect.
you'd have to talk to Angie. Angie's there, and she has a little better idea. So
Okay. Board Member Cannon?
Well, I was at the same Emergency Operations Center meeting that Linda Hanson was, and we were there with Carol and Elisa and Laura Belknap, and they were willing, ready, and eager to assist us in this. One thing they did say of interest was it had been many, many years since they'd had a fire at a school. So, but there are other things that we're less prepared to deal with, things like earthquakes or things like pandemics and that kind of thing, and they would love to work with us. My suggestion is that we make this a part of our strategic plan and develop a statewide way to move forward on school safety.
Okay. Board Member Lear?
I have 3 thoughts. First of all, one of the controversies I've heard about these discussions is, should every local school authority, including charter schools, school districts, should they have their own plan adjusted for their own needs and their own priorities, or should there be a more top-down approach? Because there are significant experts that, especially in this office, who have done a lot of work and research, and would that be the more effective approach? And so whatever plan comes up, or whatever we do moving forward, I hope that's an early consideration. Is this going to be largely state mandated with a few tweaks, or is it going to be largely local with some state suggestions? Secondly, and I have read a lot about this also, as many of you have, but in many of the articles and discussions I've read and listened to, one of the concerns is everything's not on the table. Nobody will talk about guns. And I know this isn't just about gun safety, and it isn't just about guns in schools, but I can't support any plan, any discussion, any safety discussion going forward, and I'm only one board member, but I think every element of this needs to be up for discussion and consideration.
I did say weapons when I listed the things that, some of the ideas.
Great.
Yeah,
That-
weapons
I
was the
just
last
think
thing
that-
I said.
And we'd be the first, from what I've read, we'd be one of the first few states to be willing to have that discussion.
Yeah.
And I think that is absolutely crucial. It's not the whole discussion by any means, but we can't just pretend that that's not an issue. And thirdly, I think we also have to acknowledge that there are competing values that will be pitted against each other. Privacy versus the need for student information to notify contact people in the event of an emergency. Parents' rights versus parents being willing to contact the schools and working with schools, not just taking their children willy-nilly so the school has no idea which children are safe and which ones are not. And so I think we're going to have some tough value discussions that are not all going to be easily resolved. And I just want to make sure that we're prepared for that. Thanks.
Board Member Wright, you want to turn your light on? And I'll... Okay, Board
Still
Member Wright.
old-fashioned. I just, this reminds me, I guess I'm getting old now, of 9/11 and how the federal government, dedicated trillions of dollars for security in our airline system, and, probably is a bit safer, but at an extraordinary cost. And given our schools are already underfunded, it just seems to make so much more sense to just simply give our schools more funding and let them figure out whether they need more security or how best to do it. I think that would probably be far more effective than anything we'll do at the state or federal level.
Board Member Lisa Cummins.
Well, and I'll just jump off of Board Member Wright's comment. One of the founders was Benjamin Franklin or Jefferson, has said, you can't have security and freedom at the same time. If you want that, you deserve neither. And I took that totally out of context, I know that. But since 9/11, we've been under more scrutiny. Our freedoms have been taken away under the Patriot Act. Our students today do not even know what freedom is compared to what we knew it before 9/11. So we need to be very careful. And as far as guns shouldn't. That should be a discussion, how to, maybe educating parents on securing guns, on, making sure that their home is safe, right? But the Second Amendment is that we shall not infringe upon the rights of ownership. And as long as that is secure, then let's talk about safety and let's talk about the proper handling of guns. I'm all for teaching the proper respect of teaching about guns.
I've got a couple questions just for myself before we vote on this. All in the name of school safety. School safety begins when we have a student step on a bus or steps onto the curb of a building. It ends, our responsibility as a board, ends when they get off the bus and they leave that property. And one of my concerns, maybe you can speak to this concern, maybe the superintendent can, is as we're talking about student safety, there's a part about managing everyone's expectations, whether it's guns in school, and that should be the emphasis of putting this framework together in this group, and this is a start place, it's not the end place. But somewhere throughout all of this, within this plan or within this strategy, that this framework, I should say, are you going to address the physical safety, emotional safety, professional safety, and technology safety? That's the data and everything. And as you're addressing those four areas, you have the state fire marshal who has a lot of power in the state. Is he going to be a part of all of these conversations? For an example, fire drills and all of the drills, there's an emotional part. There's a part of that that affects students emotionally when they just keep coming and coming and coming. Or is this a real drill? And the paranoia, especially if you have a fire drill after a shooting or something like, oh, is this my school that's happening next? So as you're putting this framework together, you have the state fire marshal, then you have who has a lot of authority in the state. You have the sheriff's office, who at times, their authority jumps up against the feds and a few other things where they have accountability and responsibility. And then there's our group, USBE, State Board of Education, and then there's the local control. So as you're putting all of this together, are all 4 of these elements that's in your proposal going to be addressed openly to all participants? I hope so, because if we're going to move betterments forward, these key organizations and or people have to be part of the solution and know their role, and then we have to trust them in their role, and we may be changing legislature or something of that nature. So that's my concern. I'll just repeat it. Are those 4 areas going to be constantly monitored or be a part of that framework as we're dealing with the buzzword, the big word of school safety?
Right. I appreciate that question. I think the beginning stage is to seek input to establish the framework, and that includes determining who are our partners, what do we need? I mean, those are basic questions, but yes, I believe that all 4 of those areas need to be addressed, at least on a statewide school safety plan, yes.
So all stakeholders, superintendent?
Part of our interest in attending the conference, we were invited guests. So their state superintendent reached out to all the state superintendents and said, we're having this convening and we invite you to come and bring people on your staff to see what we're doing. And then they had a breakout for state chiefs and law enforcement. Like there were AGs there from other states, and it was a convening of about 30 in a room. And states are talking about this very issue. What is their role? And I think what I walked away with after that conversation with state leaders was that what we don't have is a framework of resources, and that's what Indiana has tried to do. So it's not a dictation to schools about what that would look like, but a place where all of the entities, Chair Huntsman, that you've mentioned, all of those things would be together in one place, so that from a school perspective, if you're a parent, an educator, a student, that you would have a place to go to see what the resources are and the kinds of things that we should be paying attention to when it comes to safety in schools. So it's sort of this comprehensive look at what does school safety mean and where are the resources. I mean, something as simple as I've been asking family, I'm going to bring up guns, and I know that's not a popular thing, but this is just something very simple that I come from a family of gun ownership, and I asked my own family members if they knew that they really are safe with guns, and they lock them up. But I wondered if they and their friends knew that you can get trigger locks that can be given away free. And we might know that somewhere in the Wasatch Front, but in rural areas, I'm not sure that they always know that. And maybe not everybody in the Wasatch Front knows that, so that's just a preventative measure. So there are a lot of things that I think that are just resources of information that I would perceive placing somewhere in one aggregated site so that local schools can make decisions that works for them and families and parents. And that was my takeaway. We have some digital resources in our own state that are amazing. When you think about Safe UT and the Tresset Group out of Logan, what they're doing with being able to look at responses and audio enhancement, what they're doing with classroom cameras, and I think there are a lot of tools that we have that schools can make choices to access that they just don't know about. So I just wanted to add that because that was my takeaway. I would encourage you all to go to the Indiana website, and you mentioned Virginia. We've looked at a lot of those websites to see what are the possibilities, and it's less about dictating what happens and more about providing information.
Okay, we have a couple board comments here. Board Member Stokes.
So I guess the anticipation is that we are going to set up a task force to come up with recommendations on school safety. Is that correct? Is that what I'm hearing?
No, it was
Or
just
a
to direct staff.
Staff driven.
So, we spend a lot of time in this state doing audits. on all kinds of things, and many of them don't really have any life-saving impacts. But I believe there ought to be a list of recommendations that are developed by whether it's the staff or the State Board of Education. They ought to be sent out to the 41 LEAs, and we should give them a year to implement the recommendations of whether it's staff, task force, what have you. And then we ought to actually do an audit of all LEAs to find out how they have met. And we ought to issue a complete report online so that parents in this state can see, have school districts met the safety needs as it applies to this. We know we're not meeting the emotional needs because we can't afford enough school counselors. We know we're not meeting many other needs in the state for our children. This is something I think of utmost importance, that if we could develop a list, a simple list, send it out to our LEAs, and then come back and do an audit so that parents know whether or not, at least with this one item, they can count on their students being safe when they send them off to school. Because there are many other things out there that cause problems and pause in safety, which we don't have a lot of control over. But I think this is one area where we can effectuate change, and we should try to do it at all costs.
I agree.
Board Member Reby?
Janet kind of brings up a great point that we don't have many fires in our schools anymore. And the reason we don't have fires in our schools anymore is because our fire marshals across the state come and look at our schools. They say you're not allowed to daisy chain, you're not allowed to hang things from the ceiling, you can't put paper on the walls. We have created a minimum standard for safety to prevent fires in our schools. So the point of you bringing up very layered systems in our schools, we're not saying exactly what you can put on your walls in a fire instance, but we are saying this is the minimum standard. So I would like the police department to have a minimum standard of how we're going to secure our compounds, clear, and make sure our schools are safe. And so, that would be the minimum standard. And I think for local control, we can start moving forward towards other things. But the reason why we don't have fires in our schools anymore is because our fire marshals gave us the minimum standard. And I think that we can ask that from our police departments too. What's the minimum standard, and how do we secure our compounds?
I'm not seeing any other comment, but the motion that's before the board is that the board directs staff to seek input and establish a framework for a statewide school safety plan for board consideration. Let's take that to a vote. Not seeing any other comment. All in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? Voting was unanimous. Thank you. Okay, we're moving forward.